So, I've got some things I want to say about Marty Supreme, and I wasn't entirely sure how to say it. If I'd made this video right out the cinema, it would have been nothing but gushing praise. If I'd made it in the days after, it would have been a scathing review of the film's ending and how it betrays its own themes, and another version would have settled somewhere in the middle. But the more I've sat with Marty Supreme and thought about it, and the more I've engaged with other people's thoughts and reviews of it, the more I wanted to use the film to make a broader point on what I perceive to be the real cost of toxic ambition. A point which really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual content of the film itself. First though, let's talk about the film. Heavy spoilers if you haven't seen the film already. Timothée Chalamet stars as Marty Mauser, a 23-year-old Jewish man in 1950s New York with a desire and what he feels to be a responsibility to succeed in the sport of table tennis by any means necessary. And if that includes neglecting and manipulating his friends, family, or lovers, and generally just being an all-round asshole, then so be it. After losing the British Open finals to Japan's Koto Endo, Marty essentially spends the entire film trying to put enough money together to travel to Tokyo for the next tournament so he can get his rematch, win the tournament for a huge amount of money, and fulfill his dream of becoming a household name in the sport. Along the way, Marty also finds out his girlfriend, kind of not girlfriend, is pregnant and fucks off to Japan anyway while she's in labor after she gets shot during one of his harebrained schemes for cash, alongside a cunt of a businessman played by real-life cunt Kevin O'Leary, who had Marty humiliate himself in front of him and his friends in order to get on his private jet to Japan. And when in Japan, Marty is scheduled for a non-tournament exhibition bout with Koto Endo where he throws the contest for a handsome payday from the cunty businessman. However, when he's about to be humiliated again after the loss, Marty reveals the entire exhibition was a charade and challenges Endo to a real match right there and then, which Marty, having since found out that due to a fine he was removed from the tournament in Tokyo, wins, gaining back a significant amount of pride without any actual gain in what was presented as an uplifting all-American underdog story before Marty has to return to his newborn son, leaving you wondering whether Marty will live up to the expectations now on him as a new father. There's a lot to unpack here between themes of the pursuit of greatness, nonconformity, making the most of one's life in the face of exceptional circumstances and horrific tragedy, adolescence, self-worth, and a million other things I could pick from. On the whole, the film does a very good job at balancing all these themes and presenting Marty as both a self-centered egoist and a sympathetic character in ways not dissimilar to the other protagonists in Safdie Brothers movies. Taking this approach does come with the risk and expectation that audiences may form warped views on a character like Marty because of how complicated he is, meaning audiences may take away messages different to what the film is actually trying to say, a la 500 Days of Summer, Whiplash, and American History X, just to name a few examples. Films like these do leave themselves open to miscommunication due to the very fact that the perspective we're seeing on screen comes from the protagonist, the character we're meant to know and trust and go on this journey with, and part of the reason I wasn't sure how this video was going to turn out was because I wasn't sure if Marty Supreme fit into this category on the basis of what actually happens in the film itself. You could argue this film somewhat falls into this trap and muddies its messaging, as the framing of Marty's victory over Koto Endo as this moment of success for the American dream could be viewed as especially problematic when framing itself both in the modern climate, but also framing it against Japan in the 1950s, something which Marty does not shy away from in some admittedly darkly funny moments throughout the film. After everything Marty has done, and even despite the great twist of him not being entered into the tournament when he went to Tokyo to enter, he still gets to win that fight and get to go home and hold his newborn son after completely fucking over his girlfriend the entire film. I'm not sure about that. On the flip side though, and the interpretation I ultimately believe is the correct one and the one the filmmakers intended, Marty's win in Japan doesn't mean anything. It's an exhibition bout ultimately everyone will forget as he fades into irrelevancy, forcing him to finally go home and confront the ultimate repercussions of his reckless actions, his newborn child. The framing of Marty's win in Japan could be a symbol of, and by extension America's, desperation and hubris, trying to do anything to avoid humiliation and maintain some sense of pride in the face of humiliating defeat. This ending could be as much about the fragility of the male ego and by extension the American ego as it could be about an undeserved redemption story. You could view it either way, though I do believe there is one intended version of the story and therefore a correct interpretation. However, I do think Marty Supreme has a wholly different miscommunication problem, but mainly because of the circumstances, as I mentioned before, that are outside of the film itself. In a society where individualism, competition, exploitation, and insecurity breeds ignorance and greed, there are few modern films more relevant than Marty Supreme, and if you're going to choose to actively address these very real modern themes like toxic ambition and everything that encompasses that with a takedown of toxic ambition and toxic masculinity, grind culture, and the need for more and more and more in the face of very real things that you need to be paying attention to, something the film, I think, does very well, mind you, you can't have your lead actor completely shitting all over this messaging in the film's promotion. On one hand, Timothée Chalamet will say it's about figuring yourself out in your 20s and growing into responsibility, and on the next he'll say it's something people could look to for inspiration on how to achieve their own goals in life, which could be viewed itself as an endorsement of everything this film is meant to be railing against. You see, the title of this video was chosen for a very specific reason, because there's another video on YouTube about Marty Supreme and Timothée Chalamet called The Cost of Ambition, where they pull together various interview clips of Timothy's career where he talks openly about his desire to be an all-time great actor, his commitment to his craft, and in reference to Marty Supreme, describes the film in various contrasting ways. While there's no direct commentary in the video, the splicing together of the footage and a glimpse of the rest of the content that the channel puts out gives the impression that their interpretation of Marty Supreme, likely bolstered by the clips of Chalamet in the video describing Marty Supreme, in a way which is very different to the actual big screen output, leans more towards embracing the aspects of toxic ambition that the film actively rails against. Go back to the trailer and it gives a very similar impression, as it's far more about Marty's drive and desire than it is about how dastardly a person could be in the pursuit of that, which goes hand in hand with Timothy's inconsistent framing of the film in interviews. And I won't even go into the platforms he's chosen to promote this film on, because that's problematic for a whole other host of reasons. You can't have a film railing against this very kind of ignorance, what I'd say to be is the true, real cost of ambition, and then promote it in a vein that embraces the very things you're fighting against, because that leaves your film open not only for misinterpretation, as I mentioned earlier, but also allowing your film to be co-opted by the worst people imaginable. Think Fight Club, The Matrix, etc. And it's a shame, because I think the film in of itself does a fantastic job covering the complexities of its various characters, and especially its lead, with judgment and understanding where it's needed, building towards a fitting ending moment of confrontation, which, while we may be able to misconstrue it on its own terms by some, ultimately it achieves its goal of putting across a very particular and important message at a time where that message is deeply needed, only to throw it all away in the pursuit of mass appeal and one man's ignorant pursuit of greatness, bleeding into the marketing campaign. I can't help but think of Mark Ruffalo's comments at the Golden Globes when talking about this, how despite how fun the glitz and glamour of Hollywood and by extension one's own personal and professional desires can be, there are bigger and more important things in the world going on, things that can be illuminated to unknowing audiences when seen and put into context on the big screen. So it's even more disappointing when films like Marty Supreme and some of their award season contemporaries present progressive ideas in their films that they don't actually believe in when the red light is turned off. Which, in a world that, as I mentioned earlier, functions on ignorance and individualism, where the pursuit of personal goals is lauded over moral ambition, where competition and comparison are sown into society over togetherness and common goals, it's expected from those who have fallen into the very trap that their art is about, so woven into the fabric of all of our lives that they're ignorant to the very fact that they're doing it themselves at their own expense. Maybe I'm being too harsh, maybe I'm projecting onto Marty Supreme because of my own frustrations with the themes it discusses and their broader real-life effects on the world, but in all fairness to me, it wouldn't be the first Oscar film this year to pander about things they should have just shut up about in hindsight. Ambition should be admired as a character trait, in context. There's definitely something to admire about Marty's relentlessness in the film, especially considering his harrowing background, and Timothy's unabashed honesty in real life about his own ambitions is just as admirable. But when this ambition begins coming at the expense of things either just as or more important like it does in the film, or preaching about the film being about sacrifice or an antidote for young people in a bleak time like Timothy said in his interviews, what the fuck are you talking about by saying that? Should you believe in yourself and your pursuit of what you believe in? Yes. Should that come at the expense of others? No. Is it that easy? Of course not. But Marty Supreme definitely isn't a fucking film to tell you about everything you need to know and believing in yourself when the lead actor can't seem to decide whether or not he likes the character he played or not and what audiences should take from him. And I hope people take the time to think about that and discuss it as much as the film itself during awards season and beyond, especially with people who may fall victim to misinterpretation bolstered by one man's poor framing of what the film is actually trying to represent. Because as much as I bitch and moan about it, I do at the very least welcome the discussion around it and hope it can trigger people to talk more about and address the real issue of toxic ambition that encompasses not only the life of Marty Mauser, but the toxic ambition of so much that we see beyond the big screen in your life and mine. Anyways, thanks for watching this little rant. Let me know what you thought of the video and of Marty Supreme in the comments. Like, share, etc., all the YouTube stuff. Please enlist in the narrative war, and I will see you in the next one. Ooh, boo boy.